Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another Climbing the Rating Ladder video. I'm playing Rahul Singh, 1905. That is not their rating. They're actually rated 2003. Now, obviously, I'm tempted to play Scandinavian, but let's do something a little bit different, shall we? I'll play a Sicilian. Okay, and we get knight f3. I'll go d6. We do have a main line, okay. Open Sicilian. And bishop d3. Okay, I don't think I've ever faced this in a serious game. Normally, white plays knight c3 and defends the pawn, keeps the bishop flexible. I'll just play knight c6. I was actually planning on playing knight c6 against knight c3 anyways. That's the classical Sicilian. And then knight e2. Okay, so very odd play. It wedges this bishop in. I probably don't want to think too hard here. I mean, I could try to chase that light square bishop, but I'm just going to go for a fianchetto. I'm going to send this bishop to g7 and then look to castle. I don't think this is a fearsome setup for white. There's no way that this can be a critical attempt. So let's not get in our own heads here. My own head. Let's just play some natural moves. Bishop g7. And sip our tea as well. Shout out to Eric Rosen. I'm sure that's something he would say and do. Yeah, so opting for a dragon setup where you fianchetto this bishop does make a lot of sense in non-critical Sicilian lines. Certainly within the open Sicilian, but also I would say even against anti-Sicilians. If white is playing something other than knight f3 followed by d4, a lot of times going for a fianchetto makes sense for black. So king h1, and actually now I'm even thinking of going for a double fianchetto. I do like the look of that. King h1, I think the way we have to read this is white is gearing up for f4. So they want to advance this pawn. They probably just don't want to run into any issues on this g1, a7 diagonal, though. I could try to hunt down this light square bishop again. Like, that's super tempting. Knight a5, or knight e5, rather. Or knight b4, maybe. Not 100% convinced by it, but I would like that bishop, so let's go for it. See if we can induce f4, and then I'm going to capture and likely play b6 and figure out where I want to put that piece. And because white is committed to king h1, I do like the look of my bishop sitting on b7, lasering that king, even if there's a lot of stuff in the way. So yeah, we're going to take. And here is where I was mentioning b6. Yeah, probably doesn't make much sense to do anything else. You could try to play a6 and then b5. That's a typical Sicilian advance on the queen side as well. But I already like my position. I've got the two bishops. We even have, well, no, not a time edge. I was about to say, we even have a little bit of a time edge built up, but not yet, John. All right, knight g3. So just trying to anticipate how white plans to play this position. I think they're going to go for f5 in the near term. So I can continue with bishop e7. This bishop a6 move makes sense too. Hit this pawn with tempo. I do kind of have to watch queen a4 in some cases. Maybe I play bishop a6 to start, knight f3, and then, I don't know, queen d7 or something. Kind of go from there. Yeah, I think I'll do that. Bishop e7, probably not a bad idea either, but let's probe this pawn on d3. Let's see what white does about that. With my fianchetto nest here on the king side, my pawn on g6, the bishop on g7, I think white's going to have a tough time getting at my king. It shouldn't be easy for them to whip up an attack, even with the f-pawn coming forward, especially because white doesn't have the bishop pair anymore. Okay, so knight f3, queen d7, bishop e3, maybe probable. Okay, white plays knight b3. Yeah, that was a little unexpected because these knight jumps, knight g3, knight b3, typically knights really don't do well on those squares, b3 and g3 or g6 and b6. They often get chased away by rook pawns, but I'm not exactly in a position to do that. I think I'll just play another kind of standard Sicilian move. Rook c8. Take this open file. I no longer have to worry about queen a4. Then rook b1. Huh. Maybe stepping out of this diagonal. But that looks pretty long range. All right, so queen d7 is a move I'm considering here. I like the look of going to b5 or possibly a4 even, now that this pawn is undefended. I probably wouldn't even be able to take that pawn because rook a1 in some cases would just win the piece. But I could start with that move. Sometimes you'll see players pivoting their knight to d7 in the Sicilian. I could definitely play that here too. Try to go knight c5. But let's play queen d7. Connect the two rooks. And yeah, I think white already has something to think about, especially with the queen b5 move. Queen b5 hitting the pawn. Because let's say that actually happens and white gets careless and plays d4. At that point, everything else being the same, I could play knight takes e4, deflect white's knight from g3, and then I'd have queen takes f1. That surely will not happen because white can use their move here to do something, and even after queen b5, they can play something like rook f3, probably the most likely defense. But those are the things that I'm starting to think about here. All right, bishop e3. Yeah, so queen b5. At this point, white could play d4 in response to that move, because they've now got double defense here. But let's say queen b5, d4. I mean, I might just play queen d3, invade. If white swaps, then that's a fork on the rook and also the pawn. So I could just keep motoring here. Now with bishop e3, white actually just severed the potential defense of that pawn. There's not going to be a rook d3 move anymore. So I do like that. Another thing that should flash through our head here with the bishop on e3 is the move knight g4. I could jump in and hit that bishop, but I would assume white's going to drop back to g1, and then my queen has to babysit the knight. So yeah, let's play queen b5. And notice here too, this is a characteristic of a lot of Sicilian positions. In a way, I'm actually benefiting from my pawns being a little further back. I have no pawns past the 6th rank here, and white has 2 pawns past their own effectively 6th rank, the 3rd rank. They have 2 pawns established on the 4th rank, and therefore white has optically a space advantage, right? They control quite a bit of territory along that 5th rank, especially in the center and on the king side. But that may actually work against white here, particularly because I have the bishops, and white doesn't have any targets really to balance out the pressure that I'm already starting to exert, right? So their bishop on e3, it's walking right into this wall with the pawns on a7 and b6. Yeah, they're playing knight c1. That is a way to defend here. So again, like these moves, knight takes e4, they're not quite working yet, but they aren't so far-fetched. It's starting to percolate. So like maybe h5, trying to kick this knight away could make some sense, or prop up knight g4. I think I should be ready for white to play a4 soon. Like that seems probable that white would do that. Maybe I adjust by playing queen c6, trying to invade on f2. But I kind of like this h5 move, actually. That definitely catches my eye. I'm going to go for it. And if white goes a4, maybe then I'll play queen c6. I didn't quite calculate if white goes b4 at that point and threatens a fork, what I'll do. But I would assume I could just continue with queen c2 and step out of the pawn fork, or maybe drop my bishop back proactively to b7. Okay, so f5 in response, but h4 looks programmed here. Now, I'm not going to win a pawn because white's going to retreat to e2, I'm almost certain. But then I've got the knight g4 move. I could maybe gouge white's king side. I could see this bishop dropping back at some point soon. This is starting to look interesting. I could also play knight g4 here and use my h-pawn as a springboard, as a means of defending that knight, and maybe transferring it to e5. So knight g4, bishop e3. Ooh, even bishop h6 starts to look interesting there. Lots of moves. All right, now I got to be careful. This is the type of position where I tend to think too long. And then I might even get a good position or improve it, but not have enough time to convert. So let's be aware of that. So h4 and knight g4 both look quite good. Both are tempting, I will say. Could even combine them. Yeah, let's go h4. That was my first instinct. Knight comes back. I'm probably going to go h3. I really do think this diagonal opening up should bode well for me. I don't particularly care about the h-pawn, so yeah, let's do it. And I think white's going to have to take. If they play g3, the effect is almost worse for white, having this pawn all the way down here. A black pawn rather than a white pawn. This is another thing you see in Sicilians a lot of times is a flank pawn move down the side of the board. Whether it's the h-pawn or sometimes it's the a-pawn. Garry Kasparov was very good at this, by the way. He did it in all sorts of openings. The King's Indian defense as well. He was known for doing that. But I've seen many Sicilian games where he's effectively used his pawns this way as well. Okay, rook f3. So white doesn't take. Yeah, let's take. This is an auto move. And it's so tempting to bring this bishop back and just try to crash through on the light squares. I'd also be threatening to take on f5. Got this knight g4 move in reserve. Probably don't need to play that card yet. Yeah, let's pull the bishop back. Because if I keep the bishop on a6, I'd effectively be saying, I think I'm going to get at the d3 pawn. But I really think my attention now is focusing to all the targets on this long diagonal. The longest diagonal on the board for my light square bishop, this h1, a8 diagonal. And I actually am threatening knight takes e4 as well, because, or maybe not, maybe not. It does hit that rook on b1, but I might not quite be ready for that one. We'll see. But yeah, this is looking dire for white. I don't think they'll be able to keep this together. I'd be pretty surprised, but I'm going to have to execute still. So they step off. Maybe now is time for knight g4. This is a sensible move, by the way. I definitely understand that one. Well, what about knight takes e4? I mean, I could still do it because actually that's a very unusual fork of the two rooks. Now that I think about it. Is there some complication with knight d4 at that point? I mean, knight d4, I can probably play bishop takes d4 at minimum. I would think that's good. This is nice if it works. Is there like an a4 move that they could throw in? Down to 2 minutes, 2.5. It was either this one or knight g4, and this feels right. I'm going to go for it. Even if this somehow backfires, I'm opening the position further for the two bishops. I'm destroying white's center. Remember, knight c3 doesn't work. I can take it either way, really. And there's the queen also participating. Okay, they do play it. Yeah, probably bishop takes is most effective here. Let's do it. Might as well use the lower value piece, although I do like that dark square bishop, that fianchettoed bishop. Yeah, and here, just figuring out which way I want to capture. There's also bishop takes f3, which would be tempo on the white queen. That, I think, would be the way to really trade stuff off. But I think queen takes b1 is just pretty brutal and straightforward here. Yeah, let's take. And now I can cash in here. Is there any chance something like queen h5 is going to mess me up? I really, really doubt it. The heat is coming in on c1 as well. Queen h5, take with check. If white takes on g6, I think probably just bishop takes back. And it's nice that my queen is also attached to that bishop, so there shouldn't be any issues there. Pawn takes looks good too, but let's take with the bishop. I think that's easiest. Okay, 120 on the clock, but I feel very confident here. This is just a vice-like grip on the position and up material. Crazier things have happened. I have blown more winning positions than this, I can assure you. And probably in the last few months. I played a lot of bullet chess on Lee chess and lost some games that I still have nightmares about. Yeah, just not much to do for white. Even rook takes, it doesn't expose my king in any way. You know, if white was hoping for some miracle like pawn takes g6, queen d5, it's just not going to work because I have the option of queen takes g6. I kind of think white's going to play h4 just to try their luck in threatening h5. But we'll just ignore it. We'll play the rook over and pile up against this pinned knight. White is pretty hopelessly busted on the back rank. One too many high value pieces here. The queen and also the king on the back rank. Yeah, kind of a violent tactical game that exploded towards the end, but really, really interesting one. Okay, queen d5. Could take on c1 here. We're going to get a bunch of checks. I could also play rook takes e3 if I want to keep it a little more forcing. Rook takes e3 is kind of nice. I think I might do that. Just deflect their rook. Again, this is not a threat because of the queen. So white is pinning my f-pawn, but I got the queen involved. Take that with check. Now let's bring this over. I'm not even going to calculate rook takes e7. I'm 100% sure that this is winning in a number of different ways. We'll figure it out when it happens. So just get the last piece in the attack here. Probably simplest to play check now. King f3, I can play queen h1 at minimum. As the old saying goes, if you have a choice between forced checkmate and winning your opponent's queen, you always go for the forced check, or sorry, you always go for the win of the queen. Okay, let's check here. King e1, rook c1 is mate. And this could be nice. King g2, bishop e4. That's pretty brutal. Or just rook takes e2 check. King g1, there's rook c1. Okay, let's tell my opponent, thanks for the game. I always appreciate the players that I encounter in climbing the rating ladder. Remember, this is a long-running series. I have videos in this series going back 6, 7, probably even 8 years. I think I was the first person to make this type of content. Not to like toot my own horn, but the type of speedrun content, a lot of people call it that as well. I've been trying to approach these games in an educational way for a long time. And I know you guys learn a lot from these games. So I just want to say I'm really appreciative of my opponents. We're not trying to flex on them. We're not trying to just bash lower rated opponents and say, look at me, look at me. It's about learning. So I welcome any comments, especially from my opponents. Sometimes they do show up in the comments. It's cool. So yeah, this line that white played, bishop d3, this is a move. It is a line that you'll find in the database. I don't quite get the point because to me, if white's playing bishop d3, they're basically saying they think that their knight is better off flexible, but their bishop is best committed to d3, which I have a hard time seeing universes where that's actually a valid argument. And black has quite a bit of freedom in what to play here, just as they do against knight c3 for what it's worth. You can play Najdorf, you can play classical, you can play dragon, Skaven engine, e6, all manner of lines. But bishop d3 somehow seems a little narrower. It does sever the defense of the knight on d4, which is why I played knight c6 in reply. And just pressing fast forward a little bit, we were maneuvering. I do think once I eliminate that light square bishop, the engine's probably going to give me a small advantage. I think for white, things start to go astray when they play knight b3. You know, a lot of times when you're getting into a middle game in a chess position, you have to start thinking about how your pieces are going to cooperate, how the flow of your play is actually going to run. In what direction are you going to play? Are you going to be playing in the center, queen side, king side, combination? And to me, playing knight g3 and then playing knight b3, this just seems disjointed. The knights are very far away from each other. It's not clear, especially I'd say, where this knight is going, the knight on b3, because its forward progress to c5 and a5 is blocked. Knight d4, probably not so appealing. It's undefended. This knight, I think it's okay that it doesn't have a destination square. I have a pawn on g6. You can see how both knights are being restricted in that way. But knight g3, I understand in terms of unfolding the kingside attack with f5. I really thought white should play knight f3 and then use that principle that your pawns typically point to the side of the board that you want to play on. Right? Like white has gone through the trouble of establishing, especially the f pawn on f4. And in conjunction with their e pawn, I think playing for f5 is kind of the only compelling plan here. Or maybe playing rook e1 and then d4 and trying to advance in the center in some cases. Not saying white's better here or that this is even the absolute best plan, but I think that's the most consistent and intuitive plan. Knight b3 just looks disjointed. Like I said, I think white's going to almost always regret having these knights so far away from one another. And it's not clear, like, is white coming or going here? Are they playing queenside, kingside, center? I don't think that's enough of a consideration for white, or was enough of a consideration for white when they played knight b3. And my moves are a little easier here, right? Like, I just played a developing move, bishop a6, creating a threat, rook c8. I'm not trying to overthink this stuff. I'm just letting the position unfold. You know, rook b1 again, I think that just points to, I don't want to say confusion that white's experiencing, because I really don't know what they were thinking about here. I'm just purely guessing. But the play doesn't have a central theme for white yet, and I would be concerned if I were playing the white pieces and that was going on. Yeah, because I'm not sure white really needed rook b1 at the end of the day. Like, it's not as if I was instantly leaping at the opportunity to move this knight and attack that pawn on b2. Seems to me white could have just played bishop e3 right away, because I can't play knight g4 yet, hoping to get a double attack, because I don't have my queen on d7 to protect the knight. White would just take. Yeah, and then queen b5, knight c1, another knight move. Probably this is where the wheels really start to come off. I think the whole knight b3 thing and not picking a direction, not picking a side of the board to play on was one thing. But I think you gotta eliminate this pawn when it comes to h3. When white lets me take on g2, white is not up any material, and their king is just guaranteed to be weak. So they might as well have just taken the pawn, saved themselves some time, and in some cases, maybe that extra pawn helps. I probably would have still played bishop e7 and tried to take aim at white's king, but this would have been an improved version of the game for white. Also, they haven't committed their rook to f3 in this line, so some of the lines with like knight takes e4, let's say white plays king e1, I can't as easily just tee off here and take, because I would only be hitting the rook on b1. I'm not yet attacking this rook on f1. So yeah, after this, I think the position, I don't want to trivialize potential calculations that might be involved. Being an experienced player, when you see a move like knight takes e4 and just the flow of the last several moves, you kind of just get this feeling, honestly, guys. Like, I get this feeling like this is going to work out for me. And yes, I'm calculating. I'm being vigilant for ways this could go wrong. But the trend of the game is so heavily in my favor. Unless I really miss something egregious here, I think this is almost always going to turn out well for black. So that may not be like such a big help, because that I am talking from experience here, but you can feel a little bit better about sharp decisions, even if they're backed by calculation, when the general trend of the game is going in your favor, right? Like, that's just kind of basic confidence in what you're doing. And that's really what I was experiencing here. You know, when you start hearing me say, oh, you know, I think I have multiple good moves here. I could play h4. I could play knight g4 if we back up to this position. And then, you know, here too, even if this didn't work, knight g4 still looks good. d5 is probably really good. Start busting up the structure. That's when you feel like, not that you can't go wrong, but you feel as if you make an intuitive choice that's also backed up with some concrete calculation. If needed, things are going to turn out quite well for you. So yeah, I don't see any issue with knight takes e4. I was trying to see if white throwing in a4 somewhere could hurt me. But a4, queen d7, let's say, just kind of boils down to this being an issue for white. Highly unusual fork of two rooks by a bishop on different diagonals, not even like skewering them, but just completely different diagonals. And it works out. I mean, maybe something like this, just trying to get me to take with the f pawn so they can bail with this, but I probably just take the rook on f3. This one might be okay too, but this looks even safer. So yeah, we'll check that moment with the engine. And this was just clean up. But again, always being safe about threats around your king, right? Like, that aspect, I wouldn't have felt as confident about this if I didn't understand this aspect of the defense where my queen on b1 is also participating, preventing any issues with a rook takes g6 move, further exposing my king. Okay, let's click into the game review. All right, I got a 90.7 to my opponent's 79.5. I like the shape of this graph. I'm going to skip an intense discussion of the opening because I'm trying to be a little more mindful of my voice lately, guys. Try not to make as long of videos. I know you guys would much rather have me preserve my voice and create more videos versus having to take extended breaks, which I'm still kind of having to do from time to time, unfortunately. Yeah, so knight c6, by no means the only move, but I was happy with that. Yeah, knight e2, I am curious. Let me just throw on the opening explorer. It's pitching me a chessable course. Very nice. On the classical Sicilian. I should actually pick that one up. I think Srinath is a great author, so I should actually pick that up. I don't know how to access the opening book anymore. Explore? Oh yeah, that's where it is. So knight c6. Yeah, knight e2 is not played too often. Most games go knight takes c6, b takes, castles. Yeah, I probably would have played g6. And then all sorts of different moves. Maybe some sort of hedgehog type thing, c4. Could get something like this, I suppose. That's probably about the best white can do in this line, I would imagine. I don't think I would have hated this. And you can see the stats are pretty good for black, but that's probably about the best white's going to do. But hey, if anyone out there happens to be a specialist in this bishop d3 open Sicilian line, let me know. Because I just don't really have much experience with this. Oh, yeah, sometimes white plays f3 here, by the way. I have faced this move before. That's an interesting means of defending the pawn where you do keep the bishop flexible. Often if they're playing f3, they're trying to play c4 and then knight c3. Also, Maroczy bind style. Okay, so here we have our main line. I'm going to click back to the analysis. Don't tell me bishop g7 gets a dubious mark. Come on, chess.com. Look. Guys, I'm here to tell you, as an IM and as a chess teacher, no hate to chess.com. Oh, wow. Has my screen capture been off this entire time? Is there just a bunch of black space on the right-hand side? That's not good. Sorry, guys. I haven't made a video for a few weeks. Well, anyways, I'm here to tell you that a lot of these marks you cannot read into. I think you can probably adjust this stuff in your settings, but do not beat yourself up for playing castles here if the auto analysis tells you it's dubious. Or bishop g7, the most natural move in the position, completing the fianchetto. You can't look into that too far. Knight d2 getting a question mark is absurd. Like, that's maybe a dubious mark, but question mark, I think that's really, really harsh. I really do. So anyways, I'm just saying this because I don't want you guys to read too far into that sort of thing when the eval is barely changing. Barely changing. Here, arguably, we're getting into quarter pawn to half pawn change territory. But even still, I think we should be careful about drawing too many conclusions. I'm going to expand this because this is bothering me. Okay. All right, so yeah, knight e5. Apparently d5 makes sense here. Yeah, d5. I didn't consider that move in the game, but that is a typical Sicilian advance because white cannot play e5 in reply. So, okay, yeah, I probably should have considered that move. But I was trying not to fall too far behind on the clock, and I do really like securing this bishop pair, even though this light square bishop is kind of a tall pawn at the moment. I still like that. Yeah, b6. Knight g3, maybe it is worth criticizing knight g3 because perhaps white should have started with the knight f3 move, and they can still go for f5, still try to push in that direction, attempt to create some confusion on the king side. But maybe they don't need knight g3 yet to do it because, like, say I play bishop b7 as planned here. They can play f5 now. It's not even a question if I'm going to take. I guess the engine says that's maybe okay, but I wouldn't really consider that quite yet. I think I would just bide my time, play something like the rook c8 move first. And then maybe if white keeps this knight flexible, they could even try to go to f4. Arguably, the knight could be more useful on f4 than g3 in creating some pressure here. You know, just to show, like, let's say I play, I don't know, a5. I just play some passing move. If takes, I don't want to take with the f pawn because of knight e6. Maybe I take with the h pawn, maybe queen b3. They start to get something with knight takes g6 with the pin here. I could see some tactics starting to percolate. But okay, white plays knight g3. Yep, bishop a6, hit that pawn. Yeah, and I think this mark is fair because I was criticizing that too. Knight b3, it just doesn't seem like the direction you want to go. I was mentioning knight f3 as well. I think you just gotta kind of commit to playing on the king side because that's the only part of the board where white can claim to be better. Like, long term, my two bishops are gonna do quite well on an open board like this. White doesn't have really much going on the queen side. They're already having to defend in the center. So I think white's got to make a bid for some play on the king side. And typically you want your pawns leading the way. So f5, maybe e5 in some cases. But I think that would be the play. And then rook c8, rook b1. Yeah, really didn't like that move. It didn't seem to do much. Admittedly, it's tough for white at this point. I think they are worse. Okay, queen d7. It's not liking so much. Maybe I should have considered queen c7 to try to come into c2. Because I did mention this operation later. Probably should have thought about it here. But I was already liking the possibilities of queen b5, queen a4, maybe knight g4 with the queen support. Yeah, so I get that attack. h5. Okay, so that's one of the top few moves here. Yeah, so remember that motif. If you take away something situational from this video, when knights are on g3 or b3, or for black, g6 or b6, look at the rook pawns if you're the other player, because advancing a rook pawn and chasing away a knight there is often a good idea. And often the knight doesn't have a lot of squares to go to, because very frequently when you're even considering that rook pawn advance, that knight already by default just doesn't have forward territory, forward squares to jump to. Yeah, f5. Yeah, and interesting here, because I was mainly considering h4 and knight g4. In fact, I think those were the only two moves I was looking at. Engine still mentions this d5 move. Yeah, it's a good reminder that in the Sicilian, d5 is one of the primary breaks for black. Trying to induce e5 and then play knight g4 with even greater effect. But d5, that doesn't seem too consistent to me, so I'm pretty happy with h4. And let's see here. I thought white had to take this pawn. Yeah, I think I stand by that, even with knight d4 also being up there. I really hate the look of this for white when they're not even getting a pawn for their trouble. I think this position is just too difficult to play. Something bad is going to happen on that diagonal, the h1, a8 diagonal, when I reposition my bishop. So I think you take the pawn and you just hope that you can somehow defend and maybe entice black to go for the material because they get nervous about being down a pawn or something, and then you get a chance to get back in the game. I think that's what you got to do here. And I would have played probably this move for the record and threatened this again. So rook f3, I'm happy to take with check. Pull the bishop back. Yeah, other moves too, but this seems pretty logical. And here we go, knight takes e4. Yeah, top move. All right, now the chess.com evaluation's fine, guys. Highly endorse it, you know, especially when it gives me 2 exclamation points. I don't know what's up with my screen capture. I feel like it's moving around. Either that or I'm losing it, but all right, knight takes e4. Yeah, just a pattern that we were looking at pretty much as soon as the bishop comes back, but actually even way before, right? Because I mentioned some themes with the queen and the bishop linking up here. Like if white's knight on g3 were ever not defending this rook, and we could land knight takes e4, I was mentioning things that could happen like that. So, yep, it does appear to be pretty clean here. It says this is best for white, taking. It's a pretty devastating pawn to lose. I mean, maybe what happens if take on g6? I'm just trying to think. I know it's not listed here as one of the top few moves. Probably I should have calculated that move. Point being, if I take with the f pawn, then they get time for this again. Apparently, even this is good for me. Wow. Yeah, I just start coming in on the light squares here. White's so disorganized. Their queen is undefended on d1, so even moving their knight doesn't help in a lot of cases. Yeah, this is kind of what I was mentioning before we even looked at the analysis. Just all of the factors in the position, white's weak king, their lack of a bishop pair, their overextended pawns, their poor coordination. It's like I have a lot of margin for error here, even if I miss a small tactical detail here. Like worst case scenario, I'm getting 2 pawns for a piece, and white's king is wide open. And my king is very safe. Yeah, knight c3 didn't do white any favors, but there's just not too many other good moves. f6. Yeah, I don't see that changing things too much. Although I guess if I take with the pawn, maybe knight d4 makes more sense now, because I don't have bishop takes d4 anymore. Which was going to be my intention if white played it here. I think I mentioned this line, take, and I'm still on this one. White has linked up with the defense of the rook with their queen, but not the other rook. Yeah, so just tough. A4. I mean, I think white's just kind of flailing around here. We can just drop the queen back. Everything still applies with this double attack. So take. Is it like taking with the bishop? Well, likes taking with this bishop on f3. But we're talking pretty small differences in the eval. And again, I have my choice of how to take the rooks. Any of the captures of the rooks are good here. Looks like Stockfish thinks I chose the best one. Yeah, too much firepower. Okay. Well, a really fun Sicilian game. Look, if I could guarantee that I could play games like this or get positions like this in the Sicilian all the time, I would play the Sicilian a lot more. But I just don't think this bishop d3 line is that great for white, personally. I think if you're playing the open Sicilian, you're playing knight c3 and taking your chances there most all the time. Maybe f3 is worth looking into as another means of defending this pawn. To me, this just doesn't really pass the smell test, this bishop d3 move. But it's not like white is worse after this move in any way. But I think if you're going to play a system like this, your middle game plans have to be a little better worked out. Kind of seems like maybe white had some ideas with this whole king h1 f4 thing, because that does strike me as maybe a plan white has implemented or seen before. But I think they need a bit more of a cohesive strategy going into the middle game, particularly what side of the board that they're going to play on. So thanks again to Rahul for the game. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry again if there were screen capture issues. I will investigate why that happened. And yeah, hope you're doing well. I've been very busy. I've been traveling, working on my Scandinavian course. But let me know if you guys have any questions or comments. I always appreciate you guys watching. So hope everyone's doing well. All right. Bye, guys. Take care.